Welcome to the Worldshapers, conversations with authors about their latest books. I'm your host, Edward Willett, and this episode's guest, Arthur Slade, talking about his latest dragon assassin adventure, Brax, A Battle Divine. Hello and welcome at long last to another episode of the Worldshapers. The podcast has been on hiatus for a bit as I think about what I'm going to do with it going forward. And I'm still thinking about what I'm going to do with it going forward, but I am back with another episode featuring an author that I am publishing through Shadowpaw Press, and also an author that I talked to once before on the Worldshapers way back in the first month or so, I think, in 2018. Arthur Slade was my guest, and he will be my guest here again today as we talk about the latest book of his, which is being published by Shadowpaw Press. Brax, A Battle Divine, A Dragon Assassin Adventure is the full title, and we'll talk about that as we get into the podcast. So what have I been doing when I haven't been podcasting? Well, as I said, a lot of publishing. Shadowpaw Press is extremely active this year, has published, I think it's 18 books by the time I get to the end of the year. I don't know, which is nuts for one person and a cat, I have to admit. But I'm already up to, I think, 8 in the pipeline for next year. Then I'll probably slow down a bit. And what will I do with the Worldshapers? Not sure, but I still have a few more episodes to go, certainly talking to my own authors, and then I might bring it back, but perhaps not weekly. I think that was a bit much. I might go back to my every 2-week schedule that I did when it was audio only. However, I'm here now, and I haven't actually introduced myself. I am Edward Willett. I am an author, award-winning author of more than 60 books of science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction for readers of all ages. And actually, one of the books coming out from Shadowpaw Press next year will be one of mine, a new middle grade novel. So I'm looking forward to talking about that more as we go forward. And I'm also a publisher. Shadowpaw Press, obviously, that I've been talking about, is my publishing company, and very active. In addition to Brax, which we will be talking about on this podcast, I have another science fiction novel by James Bow called The Sunrunners, coming out November 12th. And I'll be having James on the podcast before long. And then in December, there'll be another science fiction novel, Ashme's Song, which is by Brad C. Anderson. I talked to him about his novel Duotero some time ago, and I'll have him back on to talk about the new book. Also, a couple of reprints coming up from a literary writer in Saskatoon, Harriet Richards. I have her novel The Lavender Child coming out in December, and also in the new year, I'll be republishing a collection of her short fiction called Waiting for the Piano Tuner to Die. And in the early part of next year, I will be publishing literary fiction. I have a new short fiction collection by the noted author David Carpenter coming out in January. Then in February, I have another collection by another noted author, Dwayne Brenna, called Theories of Everything. Waiting for the Piano Tuner to Die will be in there. I have a nonfiction book called Cupboard Love, a dictionary of culinary curiosities by Mark Morton, who wrote The Headmasters, and I had him on here not too long ago to talk about that YA science fiction novel, but he's very well known as a nonfiction writer, and that, as you can tell from the title, is a nonfiction book, and that will be out next year as well. And then my own book, Fireboy, which I'll be talking about, and I have another science fiction novel already planned for next year, which is Gods of a New World by Ryan Nelson, and I will be having him on as we get closer to that. So certainly this podcast will continue at least to talk to my own authors, and I expect I'll be talking to other people again in the new year. That's the way I'm leaning right now anyway. All right, well, that's enough blather off the top. Let's get on to this episode's guest, Arthur Slade, author of Brax 1, A Battle Divine, A Dragon Assassin Adventure. So, Arthur, welcome to the Worldshapers. Usually I call you Art, but it says Arthur there, so I thought I should be formal.
That's my writing name, just so people are more impressed. It's also my writing voice there.
That's also why I'm Edward and not just Ed. My book. When I started as a newspaper reporter at the Weyburn Review, I was Eddie, because that's what I was growing up. And I switched to Edward when I realized I also grew a mustache because I was like in my early 20s and I wanted to look older because I was only 20 when I started working there.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I got rid of the mustache to look younger. And at this point, I don't think there's much else I can do in that area.
You can try. I'm sure it'll work out. Yeah. It's like art is something, most people call me Art, right? And even even when I'm doing like an event, say at McNally's, and they'll put Art Slade, and I think, well, it really should be Arthur. They might not find the right book.
I should take off my reading glasses. That makes me look younger. So.
Oh yeah, man. Well, let's see if that works for. Nah, I won't even try.
And it doesn't matter that you're slightly fuzzy now. Well, anyway, as I said, welcome to the Worldshapers. You were on, very, very early on, like the first month,
6 books ago
of this podcast. Yes,
yeah.
When it was just a podcast, so nobody could see you. Then it was just
Yeah.
audio. So we talked about your writing process and all that stuff, and I've changed the format a little bit now and focused more on new releases. And you have one which I just happened to have published through Shadowpaw Press. I Brax 1, a Battle Divine, a Dragon Assassin Adventure is the complete name.
Yeah, quite the mouthful.
Yeah, when we'll talk about why it has all those sub things in there when we get to the book. But first, for people who don't know you, and there's one or two possibly, tell me about yourself and how you got started in this this writing thing that we both do.
Yeah, well, I still blame one of my teachers who gave me 100% on a short story, and that was the horrible encouragement that I needed to keep on writing. I mean, this is like when I'm 16 or so writing a few short stories and that sort of thing, and I really at that point thought I really want to be a writer. Because that's all I did was read books. So why would I leave those worlds and go into the real one? But it turns out that it actually takes time to become a writer, and I at work. That was the other thing I hadn't really calculated on.
Very annoying.
I know it still takes work. I did write a novel when I was 17, and there are 17-year-olds who probably write good novels. I was not one of them. And I remember sending it out to publishers and getting, rejection slips and feeling like, oh, I'm really part of everything. But by the time I'd written my 6th novel, and they had all the ones before that had been rejected, I was kind of tired of that whole process. And I had talked to a writer in residence. I remember her saying to me, and this is again, I'm like 20, saying it's going to take at least 10 years. And she was wrong, because it took me 11 or 12 years. So yeah, she wasn't quite right on that.
Yes, but, I have to just because we're talking about this. You're wondering why am I not paying attention to you and looking off to the left.
It's okay.
My high school novel, The Golden Sword.
Oh man. Well, I would have to dig very deeply into my files to find mine.
I used to take it to school readings, and it quickly started to fall apart. That's why this one's not in very good shape. But
yeah,
it's all there.
Is it all typed or dot? Not mine. I think mine was dot matrix or something.
Yeah, but I'm older than you are. There were no such things in our school. Yeah. I learned to type, and I was quickly the fastest typist because, well, my mom was a fast typist. I guess part of it was genetic.
Yeah.
But I was very motivated to type because my handwriting was so bad. But that book was written in longhand, and we had something called writing books, and our teacher required us to write 1 page a day about something every day for everybody. And I have the original handwritten one here too, and I know exactly when it started. I was 14 years old, and I got to the end of the semester when the writing book ended, and I just kept going and finished the book. So yeah, I was working pages and pages ahead. So yeah, so we have a lot to blame teachers for who get us into.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I could have been a doctor or a lawyer or
engineer,
or rocket science. Yeah, anything, all those things, but they didn't fall my way. It did take me 6 books though. I was like, my 7th book was the first one to be published. And my memory of that at that point, I was kind of tired of writing the whole book. So I think I just wrote the first 3 chapters and sent it off to a publisher and thought, well, it takes them a year to get back. And it was Orca Books at that time. And they wrote back within 3 weeks, said, we love this. These are great 3 chapters. Can we have the book? I said, oh yeah, I just have to finish touching it up. And I wrote it in like 2 months and just full time. That's all I was doing, and sent it off, and they published it, and kind of have been publishing since then. But apparently it works if you just leave things to the last moment.
What was that first book?
It was Draugr, which is an Icelandic word for ghost or someone who comes back from the dead. I had a series that was based on old Icelandic mythology. So I still think it's probably the scariest book I've written, even though I've written a couple other horror novels. That one still kind of gets me for some reason.
And have you written exclusively for young readers over the years? And why did you start writing for young readers?
Yeah, it's funny because in those six novels that I was writing, I kind of thought I was writing. I thought I was going to be the next Stephen King, and so I was writing what I thought was for adults. And I remember sending one of my books away to a reader who read it, and it was a blind judging thing, and wrote back saying, "This is an amazing book for young adults." And I was so insulted that they would say that. I mean, I didn't even the compliment just went over my head too. But it really got me thinking about, what do I like to read, and what do I what audience, where did I have the most joy, I guess, as a writer, as a reader. And that was when you're like 11, 12, 13, when everything is kind of falls into your brain and you believe in it and all that sort of thing. And so I'm really glad that she had said those few lines in her critique, because it really made me focus on that. And that's kind of one of the things I've always just been aiming for when I'm writing books, is to, I want to tell a good story, but I want people to just fall into it, into that other world, whether it's a horror world, fantasy world. And well, I was going to say my John Diefenbaker biography that I wrote is not quite a fantasy, but almost.
I sometimes say I've written adult novels, but my first love, if I'm just writing something for myself, I tend to fall into young adult. And I've often said it's because I grew up, but my characters didn't from when I first started writing.
That's right. I think that's one of the things, well, writers in general, but when you're writing for younger audiences, you could still act like a kid, and everybody goes, "Oh, he's just doing that because he's got to, understand." But the generation is like, I have no idea what the generation is like. I just act like a kid.
Now, you've had quite a bit of success since that first book. We should mention a little novel called Dust, which got some attention for you.
Yeah, Dust was my fourth book, and I did, as an author, I wanted to kind of keep growing, right, in terms of getting bigger publishers and hopefully getting deals in the States. I first started out in Canada, so moving towards the States, and with Dust, I sent it to HarperCollins in Canada, and they again wrote back to me and said, "Oh, we like these first few chapters, send the rest of it." And I sent the rest of it, and they didn't get back to me for a very, very long time. And at that time, I started to think, well, I should just go find an agent, because that seemed like the right path for me. So I found an agent, and that before they got back to me, and he ended up negotiating the deal, and Dust ended up. It took off in the sense that it's a horror novel. It's set in the 1930s during a dust storm, and it took off because it won a couple of awards, got a bit of attention, but then it won the Governor General's Award, which is one of the larger awards in Canada, and that just kind of skyrocketed it up the charts. And because it was with a larger publisher, I mean, smaller publishers, of course, can react quickly too, and maybe in the old days the larger publishers reacted faster. Anyway, that sounded bitter for a second. It it they it just started. They were able to get more copies out, and it ended up becoming a bestseller in Canada, and later it became a bestseller in the States too, when my agent was able to sell it down there. So it was a really kind of eye opening to go from selling 5,000 copies or so for the first few books, and then suddenly 60,000 copies, and it's like, oh, I could almost make a living at this, which was now when I think about that, it's kind of a funny thing to think.
But you've gone in a different direction as well. You've done a lot of your own publishing, and the book
Yeah.
that we're talking about started in a series that well, I guess it actually started at Scholastic, didn't it? Dragon Assassin was the
Yeah,
first.
it was a kind of a mixture. So yeah, Dragon Assassin is the series, and it was, I have to say, it was one of those things where the title ended up being the inspiration for the novel, because I was thinking I really want to write something with dragons and somebody riding on a dragon, and then I thought, oh, what if an assassin was riding on a dragon? That sounds almost ridiculous. I'll start a story about that. What could be more dangerous? And so it became, for me, that kind of perfect book for a younger reader, where everything is all action, all these things are happening. There's a little bit of violence, but usually it happens off stage, not always. And so when I first started writing it, I actually self-published it first, but I self-published it in the States and in the UK, and as I called them episodes. So 3 episodes would make up a novel, and this was something people were doing. But this is back in, I guess, 2020, 2019, it came out. and people were just kind of releasing episodes because you could do that with ebooks. You can put out an episode and then a couple, some people are doing it every month. Turns out I can't write that quickly. And so that got kind of attention on Amazon. And then I thought, well, I'd like to have Scholastic publish it in Canada because I just don't sell that many ebooks in Canada. And I sent it to them and they said, sure, we'll take it. And it was kind of it was a curious thing to watch because in Canada it came out just before the pandemic. And so the sales just tanked. Like nobody was in schools. You had the Scholastic Book Fair. It missed out on that. And if your first book in a series tanks, it's very hard to continue on. And but the odd thing is the ebooks I was publishing, because everybody's at home, everybody's reading more because of the pandemic, that it just took off. And so it was kind of just, watching those two things, it kind of moved me as a writer more towards self-publishing than it did towards traditional publishing.
Before we talk about the series in more detail, what put you into the self-publishing side of things to begin with? Why did you decide to take that plunge? Because you've been fairly successful at it.
Yeah, I think what got me into it was that part of it is I've been ebooks, the Kindle came out, and there was all this kind of hubbub about it, we'll say, and there are a lot of people who are kind of going, oh, this is the end of printed books, and there was a lot of negative stuff too, like it's not a real book if you're reading it on ebook, and it's like, and I just felt like there's a lot of fear, so I wanted to kind of understand it, and I also was, I've got just enough tech know-how to feel like I know something, and so I was able to take some of my older books that at this point were out of print and just kind of experiment with it and see how this all works. And just that experimentation, it paid off in the sense of, by the time I did write a vampire series called Amber Fang that was mostly meant for ebooks, and it did okay, but it made me kind of concentrate more on niches and on places where there were audiences that love to read a specific thing.
Vampire librarian is a niche, I would think.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because in the end, I thought, oh, this is really like this. Here's a niche, and it wasn't. It didn't sell as much as I wanted it to anyway, because the niche is vampire librarian romance. And mine was more kind of like, and they want supernatural, whereas I was kind of bored with supernatural. So my vampire is actually kind of, there's scientific reasons they've evolved along with us, right?
So it's a science fiction novel then, not a fantasy novel.
Yeah, that's right. And so people didn't want to read that anything out. They wanted to read something romantic and supernatural and them turning into bats and all that sort of thing. All stuff I wasn't particularly interested in. So it was more like a 007 librarian vampire, and turns out all those niches together, it did okay, but it's not a huge niche. So Dragon Assassin, though, when I released that, I knew there were people interested in Dragon Rider books, but I didn't realize how big the niche was, and people really got into it, especially once I stopped doing the episode thing and started publishing it as novels. Then people were much more it's just longer, right? So they get into it. Now there's 5 books in the series, and so they could just race right through it,
and hopefully come to the current one. So let's talk about the series. And you talked about it came basically out of people writing dragons, and wouldn't it be cool if it was an assassin? So I guess that's the big idea. But a little more about the plot and the setup and the characters.
Yeah, well, once I realized there's an assassin, I wanted to be a younger assassin. So it's someone who's training to be an assassin. Her name's Carmen, and she has a twin brother who is, let's just say, a little bit more aggressive than her. And at one point actually gets in a sword fight with her at school and slices out her eye accidentally, he says, partly because she's ahead of him in terms of learning everything. And so this puts her back, but she trains harder and that sort of thing. And And as she's about to graduate, when you graduate assassin school, you get assigned to a giant black swan, which are these, silent creatures that can go into the castle and land quietly, and you jump off and you go and do your work as an assassin. Well, she didn't have a swan yet, and she discovers this dragon. His name is Brax in this cave, which is actually happens to be near where where her schooling is happening. And Brax to me was one of those characters who just kind of leapt off the page. He's like Smaug or Smaug, however people say it.
Never been sure.
I know. It's like it was like Tolkien for my whole life, and now it's Tolkien. But
Maybe it's Smaug. It could be.
Smaug, yeah, actually, yeah. It doesn't sound as frightening then. But he's just one of those. He's like a literary. He hates humans, but he loves literature, human literature, and so he's always quoting things. And he's also aggressive and very, very mean. But she eventually is able to convince him by making a deal with him that she can ride him and he'll become her dragon as long as she helps her with this one task, which is to fight the Empire, which at this point is now killing off all the assassins because they don't need them anymore. And so that's kind of that's the setup. Is they're fighting? It's her and this dragon fighting against the Empire, and her brother is actually on the Empire's side. And so that's kind of the first three books are really about how you how to fight against the Empire and what happens and how that ends. And then there's two more books after that because I thought I was done, and then it turns out you leave those little kind of niggling stories and they actually turn into longer storylines.
So in those books, is the assassin the point of view character, the main?
That's right. Yeah. It's all from Carmen's point of view. So she's telling the story. This is what the dragon looks like. This is what my mean brother looks like. That sort of thing. And I really enjoy her voice. And she because she's odd in the sense that she's like bookish. She's an assassin, and she's kind of got a bit of a heart of gold, even though she's being trained to kill people. So there is that. So yeah, she's the main character, and they go through all these adventures. And like I said, there are 5 novels in the series, which is it's just a little bit shorter. And I looked at the word count than Lord of the Rings. I thought, I should do more. And once I got done the series, I knew I wanted to still write in that world, because by the time you've done 5 books, you really created this whole what I felt like was an intricate world around them. And there's someone who was reading the book. A friend of mine said, "Oh, you should write from the dragon's point of view." And I said, "Oh." That's perfect, because he is, he knows everything, hates mortals, he's a jerk, but he also has a bit of a heart of gold too, for as far as dragons go. And so that's why I decided to write Brax, so Brax could tell his story.
I thought I'd hold it up before you hold it up. So
yeah, that's right. I'll hold the big poster up now.
I was covering your name. That probably wasn't the best.
Yeah.
And the picture of my cat on the back there. So there you go.
I know. It's a very famous cat.
It's funny. I published Robert J. Sawyer's most recent book, the print version, the downloaded, and we were at When Words Collide, which well, the conference in Calgary that you were guest of honor at, and I've been a guest of honor at. And this year I was selling, so I was stuck at the Shadow Paw Press book table in the dealer's room most of the time it was on. And Rob was talking off at one of his panels, and somebody came by and mentioned to me that he'd said something about his name appearing right above the Ed's creepy cat.
Oh, it's insulting.
And then I told him that. He was very apologetic. I said I actually thought it was very funny. Shadowpaw is not creepy. He's a very nice cat. He's absolutely no help in the publishing industry, but he is a literal figurehead and shows up as the logo on all the books.
That's right. He keeps you calm.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So the full name is Brax is what's on the cover. It looks like the title, but technically Brax is the series, and this is book 1, A Battle Divine.
Yes.
And then that other one, of course, is a Dragon Assassin Adventure too. So that's why it's such a long.
It's basically I add the Dragon Assassin Adventure just so that people who are already into that world will know that this is another
part of the series.
Yeah.
So tell me about Brax. I have read it, but I'll let you tell it.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. You're publishing it. Yeah, Brax. I had a lot of fun with this because his voice in the previous novels, he only gets to talk when he's on stage, right? And you never get his point of view on anything. Well, he will tell people what he thinks, but so to go right into his head and to have this snarky, mean but literary dragon tell the story was just so much fun for me. And he's just so disappointed on how horrible mortals are, and so sure of himself. He's like the greatest dragon who ever existed, and he is a prince. He decided not to ascend to the throne and let his brother and then later his sister take over the throne. But for him, his snarkiness, especially in this book, kind of gets him in a bit of trouble because it starts out where he runs into they save some villagers or farmers actually who are being attacked by these weird kind of dog kind of, but no, they're more kind of part jaguar, part hippo kind of creatures, and he saves them, but they are creatures that are actually have been created by this goddess, and she suddenly appears in the ashes because of course he's burned up one of them of this creature, and she starts saying, "I'm coming back to the world. I'm gonna own everything basically," and he's real snarky to her. And that starts a very, very bad relationship with the goddess. And he thinks, oh, it's nothing. But of course, because she just vanishes when the dust all goes away. But the rest of the book is her bit by bit coming back into the world and taking control of different parts, including a emperor, including trying to take over an empire. And so it's again, it's from his point of view, he always talks about, I got to carry this dumb mortal around and she's no help to me and I've got to do everything, not realizing that she actually has been quite a bit of help. So that's kind of the main idea, is him against this goddess with the help of this annoying assassin who's always telling him what to do.
He seems like he was a fun character to write in the voice of, I would think.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed it. And in fact, I don't have the T-shirt yet, but I ordered a T-shirt that has him, and then it says, "I am a reliable narrator." So I'm looking forward to wearing that around. People look at it and go, "What is that?"
And although this is in the overarching Dragon Assassin world, it seems, having come to this one without having read the previous Dragon Assassin books, it seems to me that it works very well for somebody who's new to the Dragon Assassin world as well. I think a new reader can start with this one and probably will want to go back and pick up the others.
Yeah, I think that was my intention. I like the idea of writing a book that exists on its own. Clearly, they have backstories and they get referenced to in this book, but they aren't the driving force of what's happening in this book. And if you read this, it doesn't really give very much away of what happens in the first 5 novels, because there's a lot that happens, other than that there's this relationship between Carmen and Brax, and that they're kind of bonded in the sense that, well, they're actually physically bonded, because at one point she when she makes her deal with him way back in the first book, she actually makes the deal that because she's missing an eye, that he has to give her one of his eyes, which is as gross as it sounds. and so over the book, she's starting to get some dragon powers, but he also oddly has a mortal eye, kind of like hers, growing in his skull. So he's now getting these horrible mortal feelings and things, and seeing more color than he did before, and just feeling awkward about it all.
So this is the first book. How many are you thinking it will take to tell Brax's story?
Well, I am, and of course, this is where I have to admit that, have I planned it all out? I have not. But I also, that's what happened with Dragon Assassin. I thought, well, this will probably be 3. Right now, I'm saying it'll be 3 books, but that's what I said last time, and it turned into 5.
It wraps up, but there's definitely more story to come. That's very, very clear at the end of the Battle Divine.
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that I try to do, is to give people the full story, that you get done. You go, okay, I know everything I need to know about this particular story, but there are enough things left over that that there's something else coming. It's not like the cliffhanger ending and then you go, oh, I have to go read another whole book. You can, well, I don't want people to stop at this one, but you can get to the end and feel like you've had a satisfactory literary meal. But now you can go for another meal later.
It is unfortunate, but as I discovered in my own trilogy, The Masks of Agrima, um, and I've heard in the publishing industry from a lot of different people, the first book is always the big one, and there's always some tailing off from people who seem to really like the first book, but somehow they never get onto the second book or the third book.
Yeah, it's and I think that's kind of that's one of the difficulties. The great thing about a series, especially if the first book does well, is that you have a certain number of people who will just go all the way through it. But not everybody. I mean, even Harry Potter, it sold how many billions of copies. The second one probably only sold 1 billion, right? and then it goes down from there because everybody wants the first one. And sometimes I think with ebooks, sometimes you if you're writing fast enough, it's available right there, right? When I was writing, I'm thinking I have another series called The Hunchback Assignment. So I was writing that. One would come out every year, but it was kind of aimed at 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And then by the time I got to the 4 years later, I'm going, well, the people who started reading, they're almost ready for university, right? Like it's like they probably don't care about this anymore. And now I'm on the fourth one. So how do I get them back to the first one? And so there is it's nice when things are all done and then people can just kind of race through them. Although they should buy this book before I'm done writing the other ones, of course.
Yeah, I think once the whole thing is out there, then people discover the whole thing at once, and that's a different set of readers. But especially with young readers, there is that even if it's pretty fast, your readers can age out of especially 11, 12-year-olds, they turn into teenagers and other things start to interest them, perhaps.
Yeah.
And they that book was something they read when they were young, and now they're reading Stephen King or somebody like that. So.
Yeah. Well, one of the curious things that, because of course I was doing self-publishing, or I'm still doing it, and I had all these ads running to help sell the books. And then when ads run on Facebook, I don't know if people know this, but Facebook looks into everything about you all the time. And so when you're running ads, you can see kind of how old your audience is. And the people I'd written the original Dragon Assassin series for kind of 10 and up, and the people who were buying it were like 40 to 80 plus. And they were buying it for themselves, and they were buying it because they're still relatively long books, like somewhere around 100,000 words, but they're clean, fast reads, and they have everything they kind of need without too much violence. And so they were kind of, it surprised me like how big the audience was in the older generation. And this is kind of going back to the ebooks. It was like the younger generation would buy the paperbacks and the older generation would buy the ebooks, maybe so they could hide the fact that they're reading one of my books. I don't know.
Well, my daughter, we started her with ebooks. Percy Jackson, she started on a Kobo, an old Kobo reader. And by the time she got a few books in, it was like, I don't want to read ebooks. I want print books. So her room, which is still right over here, she's 23 now and studying in London, but all her books are still in the room over there.
Yeah.
And she doesn't read ebooks. She only wants print books.
Yeah. Yeah. It was interesting because that was when ebooks became, this big, again, bugaboo. And it was interesting to me that it was older people who seemed to be adopting them, and younger people go, nah, I want the real thing. I want to hold on to it. I want to smell it. I want to do all the things that we old people have been doing for years, all the time with books.
Yeah, I like ebooks because you can carry a lot of them around with you on the airplane. I can burn through a book on an airplane trip pretty easily, so I like to have another one ready to go right away. And there's the eye thing. Like I took off my reading glasses so I would look younger. But
exactly what I was thinking about. It's like
I can't read them, and those nice bright screens on my iPad. It makes reading. It just makes it a more pleasurable experience. So.
Yeah, no, I pull up my old Robert Heinlein novels or even Lord of the Rings, and I keep going on the page like this, and it's just not getting bigger.
No, and you look at old. I actually subscribe to a print newspaper, not a local one, but a kind of a monthly thing, but it comes as a print newspaper. And I haven't read it because the print is so small. It's even with reading glasses, it's just not fun.
Yeah. So it is nice. It's nice to have that control. And I think for my kind of one of my reasonings or understanding of why it was so much of an older audience was buying this book, despite the fact that they're what they would call a clean read. There's no swearing, there's no sex, that kind of thing. But it's also with ebooks anyway, and these were people buying on Kindle who would subscribe to the Kindle program where they pay Kindle Unlimited, where they pay, I don't know if it's $14 a month or something, and can read however many books. They know they have a set amount every, so their income is set, and they also know that this is one set expense. And so that's why they all have ebooks. They're not going out and buying, if they bought one book, then they would suddenly, that's all they could read that month. But if they have this subscription, then they're more likely to just read the ebooks.
We should mention 3 other books that Shadowpaw Press published not that long ago, reprints. These would have been from fairly early in your career, around the turn of the century, the 21st century, not the 20th century.
Been around for a while.
The Canadian Chill series. So just tell me a little bit about those as well.
Yeah, those were, again, they were they're adventure horror kind of, I want them to be a little bit creepy, a little bit science fiction-y, a little bit of everything that I loved reading when I was a kid. And these are I don't know if we could call them chapter books, but they're one step kind of down from more complicated middle grade. And the idea that I had was, well, Canada is just a creepy place for anybody who's been here knows that. And I thought we've got some weird names, right, of some of our cities. So I thought, well, I'm going to write a story in, as many cities as I can think of, that and kind of base it on and make sure that the city has a weird name. So the first one is The Return of the Grudstone Ghost, which is set in Moose Jaw. And Moose Jaw is, I like to think that it's the most known Canadian city in the world, only because people just seem to say the word Moose Jaw for some reason. It just sounds weird together, right? Moose Jaw is a nice town, by the way. I'm not putting it down, but the name seems to travel further. No, people don't even know where it is really. Just there's a place called Moose Jaw, ha ha ha. And so I wanted to think of something creepy happening there, and I thought, well, Al Capone was maybe there, maybe not. And I know there's an old school that my grandfather, my dad went to, which was Central Collegiate, which is really one of those massive old buildings that looked like
beautiful.
It was built it is beautiful. Looked like it was built to trap people inside, right?
Yeah.
And so I just thought, well, there's got to be a ghost in there, and there's got to be Al Capone's ghost somewhere, and I just kind of amalgamated all those things together to tell what I hope is a fun and creepy story. So that's the first one. That's the first one, and again, they're meant to be funny and meant to get you thinking a bit, but just move you from the A to Z really quickly, so you go, damn, oh, that's a I like that story kind of thing.
And also had a Saskatoon artist do the covers, Elaine M. Will. I was very, very pleased with those covers. I hope you were as well.
Oh, I love those covers. Those are, I guess the other publishers aren't publishing these books anymore, so I can say those are the best. No, I really did. I really love Elaine's work. She's done some lovely graphic novels, and so to see her do this, they were just perfect. So yes, very happy author here, not complaining about the cover at all.
Well, self-servingly, I will mention that Shadowpaw Press is actually publishing one of my books for the first time in a while next summer, and I'm getting her to do the cover. It's a middle grade young YA fantasy as well. Probably go for a little older look than Canadian Chills because the character is 13, but I'm still very excited to see what she comes up with. So.
I'm sure it'll be great. I mean, I'm sure the book is okay too, but the cover itself will sell it all.
Well, the funny thing about the book is it's been sitting with another publisher in the U.S. for so long that I have basically created and built Shadowpaw Press in the time they've been trying to make up their mind whether to publish this 60,000 word novel or whatever. It's not very long. And I finally sent them a note and said, you say it's still in the queue, but you know what? I'm going forward in a different way.
Yeah. It is an interesting industry because you would think that with all the technology that things would go faster, but it's still a slow industry in many ways. Not so much with smaller publishers like you, because you can move a lot faster. Like I do find publishers, I'm thinking of Orca Books, that the publishers that are smaller and more kind of can react to things and can also and tend to have a better, and I'm just telling you how great you are, but tend to have a better understanding of how the technology of it works, how ebooks work and that sort of thing than the traditional publishers. Not that they don't, but I see them as huge again, dinosaurs is the wrong word. Megaliths, Godzilla's moving around, and maybe once in a while bashing into buildings. So there we
I
go.
will,
Anyway,
I will say,
enough of the bashing.
well, we'll say one advantage that larger publishers have over me is that they actually have a staff, and it's not just one
Mhm.
guy and a cat trying to do everything. So
I know.
there's
Although those staffs are getting smaller and smaller,
smaller and smaller. Yeah,
unfortunately.
that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
So you've got Ibrax is out now. Um,
yes.
there is also, I just launched yesterday as we record this, and it'll be a few days ago when this goes live, but it'll still be running. I launched a Kickstarter. It's kind of a new thing for me. I've run 5 big Kickstarters that raise like $12,000 to $15,000. This one's only for 1,500, but or if it goes to 15,000, that'd be
Yeah,
grand, or 500, or a million,
yeah.
Um, but it's to help support the publication of Ibrax and 2 other books that are coming out. The Sunrunners by James Bow, which will be out November 12th, and I'll have him here on the podcast soon. I'll be seeing him in Ottawa this weekend. And Brad C. Anderson's Ashme's Song, which is an adult science fiction novel. The Sunrunners is new adult YA. So your
Mhm.
Ibrax is kind of middle grade, young adult, I think, is probably
Yeah.
where it would slot. And the Sunrunners is older, young adult, and new adult. Is where that one falls, and then Ashme's Song is adult. So I will make sure that somehow in the intro and outro, I will be mentioning that and giving a URL so that people that want to back this can do so. But every little bit helps to cover the upfront production costs and the marketing and stuff. So I hope people will check that out.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's not a cheap thing to do to put a book out. And again, this is kind of where I when I look at smaller publishers, that their ability to try different things that would have to go through several levels before you get to it at a larger publisher. You can just kind of do that. And I think the Kickstarter too, which I've looked at already, and people get something from it. It's not charity, right? They get ebooks, they get paperbacks, and they could even talk to us if they wanted to. Well, they're hearing us for free right now, but if they wanted to have a one-on-one conversation about writing or Star Wars or how do hobbits shave their feet, that kind of thing.
Well,
Uh,
it could be up to a four-on-one conversation because there's 4 slots available. But
that's right. That's right. So I think that, to me, that's all. And that's one of the interesting things of the new way of publishing and finding different kind of sources of. I'm of course, as an author, always looking for different sources of income, and as a publisher, you have the same thing.
yeah, and hopefully I keep plugging away here. So,
Yeah.
so what are you working on writing-wise right now?
Well, I actually have a book that is how to describe it. It is a heavy metal Dungeons and Dragons novel, and they like portal fantasy where someone goes through a door and ends up in Narnia, right? Well, with this book, it is about some 4 people who go to an Iron Maiden concert, and through no fault of Iron Maiden's, they get electrocuted and end up being sent to an alternate world where the whole world is a fantasy Middle Ages world, but it's also inspired by heavy metal. So there's a bunch of dwarves there who work, in a building called Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, as we all know is an AC/DC song. And so there's all sorts of kind of references to heavy metal, and there's the magic is also kind of music influenced in the sense that if you're a magician, you have a guitar and you have to sing songs in order to get the magic to work. And so it's I don't it's me because I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was younger, and it's also me because I love listening to heavy metal. So it is called, and it took me a long time to get this title, Metaloria, which is the land that you go to, and then of course it is Highway to Hades. So that's at least the first book, but it's a giant novel. I've never written anything so long, and we'll see if A, we'll see if I can get it done, and B, we'll see if people get into this weird world I've created.
Well, it sounds like another niche.
Yeah, I think it does. It's that kind of lit RPG literature based on role playing or inspired by role playing games. writing that people do, and it's quite popular on Amazon, and well, popular, I guess, in the real world too.
But then you've added that extra niche with the heavy metal connection.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, like, oh, not more 80s stuff. We already did that in Stranger Things. So
Well, Art, thanks so much for being on, and we should also mention that you have a book launch coming up at McNally Robinson, and also an
that's
online
right.
one.
That's right. On the 14th, um, if you go to Eventbrite, you can look up Arthur Slade, and I'm launching Brax virtually across the world with the help of Marty Chan, who's a writer from Edmonton and very funny. So at least I know it'll be funny because I can guarantee he's funny. And so I'm launching that on the 14th, and on the 15th I will be with Candace Savage, another writer from Saskatoon. We will be launching at McNally Robinson at 7:00 on the 15th of November. So one after another, we'll be getting this book out into the world.
I'm glad to hear it. So again, thanks for being on the Worldshapers for the second time.
You're welcome.
And best of luck with the book and with the new book. And it's as always great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you, and take care.
And thanks again to Art for being on the podcast. I always enjoy talking to him. We've known each other a long time, and this is now the second time he's been on the podcast. And I'm very happy that I'm now also his publisher with both Brax and with the Canadian Chills middle grade thriller series that we talked about towards the end of the conversation there. That is it for this episode of the Worldshapers. Before I give you the usual stuff about where to find us online, I do want to mention that Kickstarter that we talked about. If you would like to help Shadowpaw Press publish Brax, The Sunrunners, and Ashme's Song this fall, you can go to there's a couple of places you can go. You can go to shadowpawpress.com. You'll find a link to the Kickstarter there. You can go to theworldshapers.com. And assuming that I've gotten around putting it up, you'll find a link to the Kickstarter there. Or you can use, you can go to Kickstarter and look up Shadowpaw Press. That'll find it too. Or you can use the short URL, bit.ly, so bit.ly / Shadowpaw-press-Kickstarter. Let me just double check to make sure that's correct. I was just looking at it, but we'll be 100% sure, shall we? Kickstarter may have to be capitalized. I'm not sure. Yeah, that's the way I did it. So it's Shadowpaw-press capital Kickstarter. bit.ly Shadowpaw-press-Kickstarter. And that will take you to the podcast. This is the podcast. That will take you to the Kickstarter as well. And I hope you'll check it out. All right. Now the usual stuff. You can find the Worldshapers online at theworldshapers.com, which I just mentioned. You can find it on, not on Instagram, but on X at the Worldshapers. And you can find it on Facebook at the Worldshapers. You can find me at edwardwillett.com. You can find me on X at ewillett. You can find me on Instagram at Edward Willett Author. You can find me on Facebook at edward.willett. And you can find me on YouTube, which may very well be where you are watching this, at Edward Willett, all one word. And also on YouTube, if you like, you can walk with me around my home city of Regina. I live stream those walks most days, not every day, but many days, and blabber about stuff as I walk. So it's kind of like I don't know if anybody still talks about vlogs with a V, but that's kind of what it is, as well as just an opportunity to see Regina as it changes with the seasons. You can also find Shadowpaw Press, my publishing company, online at shadowpawpress.com. Also mentioned already. You can find it on X at Shadowpaw Press, and on Instagram at Shadowpaw Press, and on Facebook at Shadowpaw Press, because that one, at least, I got the same handle for all of these social media outlets. And that's it for this episode of the Worldshapers. So thanks for watching. I will be back. It'll continue to be a bit irregular here before I decide exactly what I'm going to do in the new year, but do come back. And next time around, probably talking to James Bowe, author of The Sunrunners. And in the near future, I will also be talking to Harriet Richards and to Brad C. Anderson. And in the new year, additional Shadowpaw Press authors. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching.